Hello, Internet. Joss Whedon has this thing where he says, the story is God. He said that in large part in different situations when people demanded his stories be different than they were. Whedon's response that the story was God worked for me on a lot of different levels, but I'll talk about two. On my most romantic storyteller level, it worked for me because a good story is a good story is a good story and fuck all else. More than likely, the more representative, the more true, the broad-minded a story is, the better it will be. And any flaws in the culture, which might probably be in the story, are not always flaws so much in the work, so much as flaws in the culture, which hopefully the story might at some point be aware of, but it might not, because that story might not be the story that the story is telling. And not every story can be about every story. On my most pragmatic and theological level, though, the idea of the story as God works for me because God is this ineffable, irreducible, illusional kind of thing. This kind of impossible smokescreen Wizard of Oz. A persistent, possibly advantageous, or, occasionally really destructive illusion. And a very real encapsulation of a very real reality of infinite mystery. And stories are all of that too. We can criticize and tear them apart and worship and pray to them, and for the most part the stories will just keep existing and keep ignoring us because the only thing we can do with the gods that ignore us is not so much expect them to change as to invent new gods. We can totally appreciate art that reflects the values that we believe in, but should the first thing we demand of art be that it reflects the values that we believe in? And if we do want to critique from the outside in, to engage in a cultural critique of a work, let's bring in other examples that show how the film we're criticizing makes the same mistakes as all these other films. And let's hold up examples of films or stories that show a deeper version of reality, so that we aren't just criticizing films for not being what we think they should be, but pointing audiences to those works that do possess those values that we share. Because the job of a critic is not to just point out flaws, but to raise awareness of awesome. The very best critique of any story has and always will be another story. Tell the stories that address the failures in other stories. Tell the stories of yourself. Invent new gods. I don't know. It's complicated. It started with two films, or more precisely, the discussion around two films, Birdman and Boyhood. Several essays, podcasts, etc. have remarked on how both of these films might broadly fall into the genre of white men figuring out how to be themselves, and that this particular genre, broadly speaking, tends to be a bit overdone and also tends to lack people of color or vaginas who possess much in the way of agency. I heard one podcaster say that Boyhood would have been infinitely better, infinitely more interesting if there had been just one change, and that would have been for it to be girlhood.